Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 69 of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I hope you are doing well. On the show today, I have Prasad Rangnekar. Yes, he's back again on the podcast. And today we talk about recontextualizing modern yoga. If you're a longtime listener of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast, you've already heard Prasad on a previous episode where we spoke about the origins of yoga and its passage through time. And if you haven't heard that, you're new to this podcast, I would highly recommend that you finish listening to this one and then you go listen to Prasad's previous episode. It's one of our most popularly loved and listened to episodes of all times. And in today's conversation, we talk about the landscape of modern yoga. In fact, we're calling it a recontextualization of modern yoga because Prasad, you'll hear him say this, says it's not possible to decolonize yoga without recontextualizing modern yoga. And we talk about why this discernment is necessary, how this discernment will make you a better yoga seeker and better yoga teacher. We talk about what is authentic yoga. We talk about what kind of goes off a little bit in modern yoga. And there's just so much more that Prasad packs into today's episode. If you've heard Prasad's podcast before, if you follow him on Instagram, you know he is full of just this profound clarity and wisdom. And he has a way of saying it, which for me always hits the nail on the head. So if you don't already follow Prasad Rangnekar on Instagram, I would highly recommend that you do. It's literally my daily dose of clarity and inspiration and grounding that I need. And he also has an extensive YouTube channel where he records a lot of his courses or workshops and lessons and classes, and he shares them on YouTube. Okay, I will link to all of this in the show notes. And I really would encourage that if you teach yoga, you dream of teaching yoga, or you're in the yoga world in some capacity, then this conversation of recontextualizing yoga, modern yoga, is really important, especially if you are looking to really stay sincere to the roots of yoga and to be authentic in your yoga journey. This episode will be truly valuable. Okay. And before I let you go, I have to remind you that if you listen to this podcast and you enjoy today's show, please remember to screenshot it, to share it, to tag Prasad at Yoga Prasad on Instagram and me, and tell us what you enjoyed most about this. And if you want to go and take that little extra effort, we'd love for you to leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. Okay. And that's it from me for now. If you are part of the Mindful Yoga Teachers Club or you want to be part of my monthly mentorship community for yoga teachers, stick around till the end. I'll tell you more about it at the end of today's show. And here's Prasad Rangnekar and us talking about recontextualizing modern yoga. Hi, my name is Arundhati and you're listening to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I'm an ex-Bollywood dancer turned yoga and wellness educator. I've built a 6-figure business as an immigrant, woman of color yoga teacher with no business background, no handstands, pure instinct, and the free information found on Google. If you love doing yoga and you dream of teaching it someday, this podcast is for you. We go over everything from doing and teaching yoga to scaling a small business, living a modern yoga lifestyle, and so much more. You'll find interesting, fun, raw conversations along with some tips, tricks, strategies, and insights in this podcast. So grab your cup of chai and let's jump in. Hi, Prasad. Welcome back to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast.
Thank you, Arundhati. Nice to be here again.
Welcome back. I'm so excited to connect with you again. Can I ask you, before we jump into recontextualizing modern yoga, you were on a 3-month silent retreat. We were about to go on one when we connected last. I just wanted to know, what was that silent retreat like? I know you do it every year.
Yeah, correct. I look at it at multiple levels. At the very, very superficial level, it is about just stepping back from my day-to-day activities and work and everything. At a deeper level, it is about stepping back from my roles, my identities, and moving into that zone of, I call it contextless silence. I don't know if I'm able to make sense, but it is that kind of a zone, where all your roles and identities are suspended, or at least toned down majorly.
Mm-hmm.
And all you have is to face yourself and deal with yourself. So it's literally like, if I can give an analogy, it will be literally like looking at the mirror for 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's then you meditate, and then you go deeper. Silence is a very generic or general term to address what happens in the quietness of your mind. Was it too vague?
Mm-hmm. No. It was actually, to me, it's been fascinating. I know of Vipassana and other retreats where you do like 10-day things, but I've never really spoken to anyone who's done like a 3-month thing year after year. I think you've also done 4 months in the past. I think I saw it somewhere on YouTube.
Yeah, I've done 5 months, but 4 months. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's fascinating to me because it's something I'm someday hope to aspire to. Not like 3 months. Let me start with like a few days at first. But one of my teachers would always say, silence is your greatest teacher.
Absolutely. I totally agree. In fact, I also make that statement a lot, because the things that happen in silence, it's not learning, it's a revelation, you see. It's like, the knowledge gain can happen from getting information or self-revelation. What happens in silence is self-revelation. So the knowledge that is inherently within you, it just comes out. It just reveals, not even comes out. I don't know how to frame it, but it just reveals itself, just like a sunrise. So, yeah.
It's almost effortless in some way, I'm guessing. It's just not effortless. There is effort in the silence, I'm guessing, but it's a very natural state.
Yeah, because the effort that generally that we feel in our day-to-day life is effort coming from our roles and responsibilities and identities and personalities and needs and demands. Once that is suspended, then there's a lot of space there within.
You just gave me a very nice segue. You were talking about roles and responsibilities and needs and demands that we have, right? And we're going to be talking about just recontextualizing modern yoga. And you and I have had offline conversations about classical yoga and modern yoga. So with all the noise that there is in the modern yoga world, why is this discernment between classical yoga and modern yoga even necessary?
See, I just want to say, before I say anything, that just because we are talking about modern yoga and traditional yoga doesn't automatically make one yoga good and one yoga bad, Just sometimes comparison doesn't necessarily mean one is good or one is bad. What I want to do in this conversation is basically objectively present things as I see them, compare them, contrast them. And what I am going through is I'm asking questions and reflecting very, very heavily myself when I see things on social media and the way our yoga industry is progressing, if you can call it an industry. So, perhaps our conversation helps a lot of yoga enthusiasts out there to reflect themselves. And this is why, having said that, I feel the discernment is very, very crucial, because the yoga that, or what we understand yoga to be in the modern, current, contemporary circumstances is very different to what yoga has been in the pre-modern times. And to understand that, we have to first define the terms. What does traditional yoga even mean? And once we define traditional yoga, then in that context, we can define modern. So I want to define traditional yoga, because otherwise what happens is people make their own context and meaning, and then things get out of hand. So what is traditional yoga? Traditional yoga is basically a body of knowledge. Okay, it's an extensive body of knowledge, both intellectual and spiritual knowledge. It's not only spiritual. There's a lot of intellectual knowledge based to that. And in this body of knowledge, there are different ideologies, practices, scriptures, rituals that have emerged in the Indian subcontinent. And this is an important aspect. Okay. Yoga as a body of knowledge has emerged from the Indian subcontinent over the last, at least documented, 2,500 years. And if you take the oral tradition and the timeline as mentioned in some of the scriptures like Puranas and all, then the timeline extends even more. Okay. So from the superficial point of view, we understand yoga as a body of knowledge with varied ideologies and practices that has emerged from Indian subcontinent. And I'm stressing on this again and again because the geographical context is very, very important here. Why? Because other geographies have their own independent body of knowledge, spiritual and intellectual. Like if you look at Middle East, it has its own spiritual body of knowledge, intellectual body of knowledge. If you see the South American continent, it has its own. So these spiritual knowledge systems have developed in different geographies. What comes out of the Indian subcontinent is yoga. Now, at a personal level, yoga is traditionally understood to be a process. This is, again, something important for us to understand. Yoga is a process. It happens over time, but it has a very well-defined goal. The process of yoga has a well-defined goal. Now, that goal is called different things in different traditions. Like in the Hindu tradition, it is called moksha, final liberation. In Buddhism, it's called nirvana. Sometimes in the Vedanta, it is called atma jnana, means self-knowledge, ultimate knowledge of the self. In a very practical sense, that end goal is called dukkha nivritti, means complete elimination of suffering. So from a personal point of view, like for example, if somebody came to me and said, hey, what is yoga going to give me? I'm going to say that yoga is a process that you will have to participate in over a long period of time to reach an end goal, which would be moksha or whatever. So this, at least for me, these important variables, they form what I understand as traditional yoga. Things like body of knowledge, different ideologies emerging from the Indian subcontinent, an ancient body of knowledge at that, more than 2,500 years. And on a personal level, it is a process with a very, very specific, well-defined end goal. Okay. If you take any of the yogic literature of traditional yoga, you will always see that there is some indication that you are moving towards moksha. So this is a very clearly defined path. Now, in this context, we have to define modern yoga. So what has happened in modern yoga is the whole, the part has become the whole.
So true.
Like I told you, the traditional yoga is a process, right? So some processes have magnified into the whole of yoga. This is what has happened. And because of that, the goal post itself has shifted. Means traditional yoga, like I said before, has a very well-defined goal of moksha. But modern yoga, that goal doesn't exist. In modern yoga, the goal has moved towards fitness, exercise, wellness, mainly done through modalities like asana and pranayama. I sometimes call it asanization of yoga or physicalization of yoga, because in modern yoga over the last 80 years or so, 100 years or so, we have come to see the entire yogic corpus from the point of view of body and postures. This is a major shift in perspective between traditional yoga and modern yoga. And it's good that you asked about the discernment, because I feel it's crucial that every yoga practitioner and teacher needs to know this clearly. See, I'm not saying that asana pranayama is not useful. In fact, I feel they are the most useful components that we need more than ever before now, especially the kind of stuff that we are going through now as a collective. But my point of view is is about the traditional aspects. When we dilute something like this, what happens to those traditional aspects? Because the trend in modern yoga is to either completely ignore the traditional aspects or cherry pick particular aspects and project them as a whole. In short, if I have to just summarize, I know I've spoken a lot on this one.
Oh, no.
Question,
it's making complete sense.
Because we have to put things in context. So in one line, if I have to say, I would say that, you see, traditional yoga is a body of knowledge, while modern yoga is knowledge of body.
Well said. Mm-hmm.
This is the major transition.
I like how you summarized that at the end. So, Prasad, I agree with everything you have said in this answer here, but do you think the process of how yoga teachers are created is where the gap exists? Or is it somewhere else? Because, traditionally, at least the teachers I studied with, they spent and still spending their lifetime learning yoga and very humbly sharing what they know. But there is this need to be an expert and have a niche.
Exactly.
And so anything you want to say to that, just this process of how traditional yoga teachers were created and modern yoga teachers are being created?
Again, I want to come to that point of context, because in life context, at least I believe, context is super, super important. You see, one person's 6 is other person's 9, right? So that's why context is important. And this is why we need to teach yoga in context. What popular yoga, I usually don't say modern yoga. I call it pop yoga or popular yoga. What popular yoga has done is it has decontextualized the traditional aspects, literally sanitized the cultural, spiritual, traditional aspects from the yogic teachings that happens in teacher trainings. Now, again, I want to say that we are discussing popular yoga. I know there are lots of yoga teachers out there who are doing great work in its holistic way. So this whatever I'm saying doesn't include that. I'm talking about the larger common popular narrative here. So we are looking at how things, sometimes I see that things that have nothing to do with yoga are passed off as yoga.
Yes.
Perhaps I'm saying this because I deeply feel about it, and I know, Arundhati, you too feel about it, because we are born and brought up in that culture. So when we see some dilutions or things like that happening, you feel it. For example, I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, I saw an advertisement of a, in quotes, fully booked 200-hour yoga teacher training. And when I went through their course module, I'm very interested in what people are teaching. So when I went through their course module, what they had written, I saw that as a part of subtle anatomy, they were teaching traditional Chinese medicine.
Oh my, okay.
As a part of philosophy, under the philosophy module, they were teaching Taoism. Under the part of, mind and, the mental dimension of yoga, they were teaching psychotherapy in something called as Enneagram model. And when I saw it, I was wondering, where is the yoga in this? Why is it even called yoga? Just because we chant Om before a class, or we say Shanti, or we do some postures, does it give us the liberty to call something yoga? Right? Like in the context of this teacher training that I mentioned, why wasn't Gita or sutras taught under yoga philosophy? Why weren't the models of Ayurveda, physical models, anatomical, physiological models of Ayurveda that have worked for thousands of years, along with yogic modalities, why had they not included the Ayurvedic models under the purview of anatomy and physiology? Why had they not included, say, the Hatha yogic models of prana, nadis, and all? It was not there. Why had they not included the whole sutra, which is nothing but, a psychological study of the mind? So, these are the questions that I ask myself. I mean, in the modern context, the liberties that we have taken to call anything and everything yoga are very, very generous. Anything and everything passes off as yoga. And this is not the only example. Again, a few weeks ago, I saw a shamanistic, it was called shamanistic yoga 200-hour teacher training. It was happening somewhere in South America. Again, the things that were included in it were a lot to do with shamanistic rituals, shamanism philosophy, and there was hardly anything from the yogic corpus. And then again, I got thinking, that when does one say that this is yoga and this is not yoga? And remember, I told you it was a fully booked course. So there were these 20, 30 people who are going to go out of the teacher training course thinking that Taoistic philosophy is yoga, thinking that traditional Chinese medicine is yoga. So
leading to more confusion.
Yeah. For me, that is something that needs to put in context if we want to create teachers who teach in context.
I once saw, speaking of examples, I once saw a local teacher training, a school that's been around here for more than 2 decades. One of their modules was teaching Kathak. Okay. And for the listeners who don't know, Kathak is a classical form of dance. And a whole module in their 300-hour training was just, they got somebody to teach them Kathak. And not even just somebody who had learned Kathak for a few years, who lived here. And that was being offered in a yoga teacher training. And I was just like, you can't pluck anything that is remotely, Indian looking or something that is so mysterious to you and put it in as yoga because you don't understand
Exotic.
it. Exotic. That's the word I was looking for. Yes.
Yeah. You see, I know it's popular to hybridize the course content with cross-cultural ideas, a little bit marketing and, for the eyeballs, as they say on social media, to make course different, to stand out. See, I'm all for cross-cultural integration and dialogue, but not at the cost of the root culture, right? Not at the cost of dilution of the root culture. You see, because what I feel is the narratives in our collective create the consciousness of the culture. The current narrative of yoga is creating the yoga culture of the future. So if we keep hybridizing, mix and matching just to make our course look exotic, without being honest to the roots of what we are teaching, it will become a norm tomorrow. And soon we'll be doing something on the name of yoga, which has nothing to do with the traditional roots of yoga. And if this trend of dilution and decontextualization continues, it is a tremendous harm for the culture.
It is.
I mean, this is exactly how civilizations have been wiped out by colonialism, no?
Yes. So I don't know if you've seen this. Of late, there is this tendency to label anyone who is upholding yogic teachings as traditionalists. I read somewhere, where we were being called conservative and unable to move yoga into the modern times. We don't know how to apply it to, say the political context or something else. So what do you have to say to this? It's almost like we're being shamed for saying, hey, this is not yoga.
You see, if we really see again, I want to stick to my definition of yoga because, Arundhati, as we know, a new definition comes out every season as if it's some fashion trend, right? So sticking, spring, summer yoga definition, autumn, winter yoga definition.
Totally. No, I love it.
So again, I want to, because I laid down the context before we started about traditional yoga, I want to weave that context into your question. Is that if we really see, even though the society has evolved technologically, since you mentioned that as traditionalists, you are not moving with time and things like that. If we really see, even though society has evolved technologically, the fundamental issues that yoga seeks to address are still the same. we are still struggling with the mind. We are still struggling with the body. We are still struggling with society. We still have existential crisis that Arjuna had in chapter number 1 of Bhagavad Gita. So basically, even though we have all the tech and all the systems in place, the existential problems that yoga seeks to address are still there. And this is what yoga makes, yoga becomes relevant even after so many thousand years. Yes, of course, there are some aspects that need to be put in context because of time. But all in all systems of self-transformation, as a system of self-transformation, yoga is still as relevant and effective as it was back then. So asanas still work. Pranayama has become necessary. Meditation practice is seen to help. Philosophical context, these little sweet little rituals, devotion, reflections, lifestyle management, regulation, all these things that traditional yoga really addresses. I mean, if you see chapter number 6 of Bhagavad Gita, it talks about how your lifestyle should be balanced. What is there not to move with times? Just because we don't prescribe to a few definitions of yoga doesn't mean we are not moving with times. No, I see yoga as this. It still works if we follow yoga sincerely in its entirety. And that's why we feel we need more yoga teachers now than ever before. Because, from teaching whatever, even if you're teaching asana, just that doesn't matter. But teach it in a bigger context. In the sense, tell your students that we are doing asana only, but we are building up towards something. Let's not forget, one of the goals of yoga is release from suffering, dukkha nivrutti. So till humans have suffering, yoga will be relevant. So how is it that teachers teaching with a traditional orientation are not moving with times?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. I've been trying to say, I can't say it as nicely as you said it, but just this fact of, because we don't peddle the popular narrative, right? And we are not on board with just slapping the word of yoga onto anything and everything, it becomes a problem, and it's becoming more visible. Yoga is this and yoga is that. And I think it's more of the bubble that I live in here, where it happens more and more, which is why I was interested to get your take on it. So can I ask you a little more about just being a yoga, not being a yoga teacher, but finding a yoga teacher? Like, what are some of the characteristics one needs to look for in a yoga teacher? Because I have met so many sincere-minded, really dedicated practitioners, and they are just honestly, Prasad, confused because they see something that's being so popularly pushed, and it's just confusing. Do they listen to this? Do they listen to that? And in the end, they just end up being confused, and it disheartens them on their journey that they're not able to put the pieces together. So what does one really look for in a yoga teacher?
See, I would suggest that, and I totally agree with you, because even I get a lot of mails from very sincere seekers, that, I want to start, I want to get on this process. How do I do that? For such people, I would suggest that they first sit quietly with themselves and reflect on what they really want from you. Because yoga is very extensive. Yoga is vast, and its offerings are vast and diverse. So they should, it's not a feel-good modality that they are practicing. So they should just reflect on what kind of yoga they need or they want. And once they find their clarity, they should go about finding the right teacher. And this process will take time. And this also shows sincerity of that person. You see, if I want to really do yoga, I'm not even saying study yoga, I want to do yoga under a good teacher, then I will look for a teacher. See, so once I find the right teacher, you just have to sincerely dedicate yourself to the practice and the study of yoga. So it will take some search. It's like the analogy I can give you is like you want to redo your home. So you want to look for an interior decorator. So you don't just Google one interior decorator and just hire them. You talk to a few, you see if you vibe and, you match with that interior decorator, you have similar tastes. And then once you feel the match, then you go about redoing your house. The same way, coming on the path of yoga is like completely redoing our house, including the furniture, that is the physical body, and including the mental setup, habit, lifestyle. So, and that's why it is, we need to, every sincere yoga aspirant needs to put a little more effort in looking for the right teacher. I'm not saying guru or this and that. I'm just saying find your teacher you can work with over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That may be difficult, but then that itself is the part of the adventure.
I also think that this, you were talking about this earlier in the conversation, you were talking about the end goal, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like the end goal is confused for a lot of people. They think the end goal is doing some fancy posture or doing a handstand in the middle of the room. And there's this gap between where they are when they start, and there's just no end goal. They literally feel like there's no direction, and they see whatever is popular and they think, okay, that's where I need to be. So there's no question there. It's just an observation. Most often they are trying to figure it out, and they just end up going in a direction that is not necessarily clear, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not visible. A lot of yoga is not visible.
Exactly.
And a lot of yoga is an internal experience. And I think also for a very Western mindset, they're used to systems and processes and step 1 and step 2 and step 3. But it's not, in yoga, it's not so linear.
You're correct.
So I think that's kind of where the gap exists. I've worked with some students for years who are so sincere, but they are still unable to break away from that. Okay, you tell me the next step. I'm like, no, the answer will come from your practice. And you have to do this sadhana to get your own answer. And that's going to be different for each one of us. So I don't think there's a question there. It's just,
absolutely right. And see, if 100 students join you, then half of them or lesser than that will filter to that level where they look at yoga as a deeper self-transformatory process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the popular perception of yoga is that it is a 1-hour activity that I do twice a week or thrice a week.
Yes, and on your mat.
On your mat, yeah. So,
yes.
And I think this is the perception that we yoga teachers have to break. It doesn't mean that yoga is not a class, but that class is building up to something that is not told to the consumer. Yes. And I think somewhere it is our moral right, if we call it as a yoga industry, it becomes our moral right as a teacher, as an instructor, or whatever you call yourself, to inform our customer or student about the goal. You have to tell them. Another thing is, now that I'm thinking of it, yoga, to sell yoga, it is projected as a feel-good activity. Come to yoga, you'll feel better. But the fact is, many times you don't feel better in a yoga class.
Yes, so true. I was just thinking that. Yes. Mm-hmm.
You see, so it's like that sugar dilemma, no? Sugar, sugar is added to processed food to make it taste good, but actually, when you ingest it, it's not good for you. See, this is where the commodification and commercialization of yoga, and that is why this, as you said, the discernment is very, very important. And I really think it is our moral duty as yoga teachers to educate, to educate people of what yoga is. I mean, I understand nirvana and self-realization might sound very, very vague and otherworldly. That's why I stick to the simple definition of yoga. Dukkha nivritti, removal of suffering. Come to yoga And gradually, we'll work on our suffering. And everybody suffers in their own way. If you have physical suffering, come to my asana class. If you have deeper suffering, come to my breathing meditation asana class. If you have existential suffering, let's sit and reflect together in context of the philosophy. So there is a solution. If we look at yoga as a solution provider, then there is solution for everybody. And this is the beauty of yoga, that it is the scope of yoga is so vast that it can include anybody. Just 2 weeks ago, I was speaking to a cousin of mine, and he was saying, is it really possible to teach Bhagavad Gita to kids? I said, why not? Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we teach Bhagavad Gita to kids? I mean, of course, we will not teach that 18th chapter higher spirituality, but we can teach them. We can
in a way they understand.
Yeah, I mean, they can easily identify with Arjuna, confused, doesn't know what to do. Any kid would identify with Arjuna. So taking a leaf from that, we could just tell them the simple teachings. So again, coming back to, I mean, I know you said there's no question, but I'm also just going on and on, that I think we need to really explore the holistic nature of yoga and teach it in a holistic way. This posturization, this posturization has really limited the scope of yoga. I mean, I know we are making yoga accessible at the physical level, which is great, but there is so much more to yoga than just the physical practice. I know it's a cliched statement, but there it is really, I mean,
it's true. Yeah. And a lot of times when teachers who say they get stuck or they get burnt out, then I tell them that you haven't explored yoga in its entirety.
Correct.
Or that's why you feel like now you're bored. If you really explore yoga and all its layers, there's no way you'll be bored, because the exploration never ends. And there's always the next journey right there, or the next lesson. So if you are getting bored and you're bouncing from style to style or type of yoga to another type, just know that you're stuck in one little corner, and you've got to turn around and look at things that at first glance may not be appealing to you.
Exactly, yes.
Right? And so I also think, just again, it's not a question, but our markers for success are very confused. Right? We look at all these external markers of success, like you said, right? Some training with 20, 30 people, which I think is a lot in a teacher training, but 20, 30 people. Oh, now my training is full. Oh, my class is full. Oh, I have 500,000 followers on Instagram. So we've completely externalized these markers, whereas all of these markers are internal in yoga.
Absolutely.
And again, nothing you don't already know.
I have an experience of that. In I think 2015 or 16, I did a teacher training course in a small village in India. And the house that we had was a small house. So I only took 7 participants. And after the course, I posted the pictures on social media, and many good-willed people. Yeah, I mean, not like people who were not sarcastic, but people who really had good intention. They wrote to me, Prasad, do you want help to promote your yoga teacher training? I said, why do you ask? We saw you had only 7 people. I said, I had 7 people because I only wanted 7 people, because the house could accommodate only 7 people. But thanks anyway. So I totally agree with you. You only had 7 people. Is it, is your training not going well? I said, no. I mean, I hadn't even thought about it till that comment came. But I totally understand what you're saying. In the physical, especially in the presentation world of social media, I can stand on my head for 20 minutes. Therefore, I am a better teacher.
You called it performative culture the first time I heard it, and it has stuck with me since.
Yeah, I mean, it has become performative culture. I'm not completely blaming it. We are all
part of it,
in servitude to the AI.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's okay. I also post my pictures in asana or whatever. But again, I have to tell you one incident. There was somebody who came for my workshop, and I said, okay, thank you, bye bye, keep in touch, find me on Instagram or whatever. And then the next day she wrote to me, she said, I saw some Prasad Rangnekar, but I was not sure it is you because there was no posture pictures in it on my Insta.
Okay.
So I was not sure it's you. And so she sent me a screenshot. She was like, is this really you? Because there are no pictures of you doing any posture, things like that. You see, so the more flexible I am, the better teacher I am. All these norms need to break.
Very true, very true. And I completely agree with you. Like we were talking about my upcoming training before we started recording. I only do 6 or 8 participants. 8 for me is a high number, because the way I see it, what we do in these months together is a lifelong foundation for them.
Exactly.
And it's not about, I should feel good that the room was packed. I mean, the room can take 30 people, but the intention is not to take that many, because then it's just a factory. So do you think talking about some of the things that we do in modern yoga that are troubling will actually I think it'll be helpful for the listeners if you can just talk about what are some of the things you see in modern yoga that we need to stop peddling or promoting or even doing?
See, first and foremost, yoga is a path of self-exploration. So the vision should be inside out, not outside in.
Mm-hmm.
Look at yourself first. This is the basis of yoga. You cannot look externally and then modify yourself. You have to look at yourself and then put yourself in context. So what I would rather handle this question saying what we should do instead of what we should not do.
Perfect. Go for it. Mm-hmm.
So I would say that through our own sadhana and our own study, swadhyay, we should establish a firm clarity of mind and firm clarity of intention about why we are doing what we are doing. Once you have this clarity, no amount of propaganda around you is going to affect you. This is, those who know the technical terms, this is the clarity of the buddhi. And this is the peak of yogic achievement. Sharp buddhi, clear buddhi. And that comes with clarity. So with this clarity, they should gradually build integrity in their teaching, their living, instead of playing to the gallery. If you see, it's like this, and it really, the way we are operating in our yoga industry, it really matches with our psychology. In the sense, see, if you don't know what is good in you, you will always be looking for validation.
Yes.
You will always be wanting to do what others are doing because you don't know what you have to do. The same thing happens as a yoga professional. If you have not taken the time to sit and establish your own clarity, your own ethos of teaching, you will fall prey to whatever trend that is trending. 6 months you will be this style yoga teacher, next 6 months you'll be that style yoga teacher, because you have got into that, that wheel. What is that wheel? The hamster gets stuck in that wheel.
It's the hamster wheel.
Hamster wheel. Okay, hamster wheel. Yeah. So you are so stuck in the hamster wheel that you did not have the chance to look within and say that, yes, this is what I want to teach. So so if you want to stop playing to the gallery, then you have to look within. And this itself for me is a yoga process. See, we all fall for propaganda. We all play to a gallery in our own little way. We are all looking for validation. So it's all fine. But we have to understand that this is a process. 10 years ago, you were looking for validation 100% of the time. You were just, following what others are doing and changing yourself all the time. Now it is, dropped down to 50%. That progress is yoga. And once you can do that, you will not be bothered about who is doing what, because you found so much clarity in what you have to do that you just do that. That's it. And this is how saints and mystics and yogis operate. If you read saint literature, you will see that they teach what they have to teach, and they are not bothered about what society says about them or does about them. That's why so many yogis and mystics, not just in the yogic tradition, everywhere, are not liked by the society, because they have found their clarity. They are not following each other. Well, of course, this process that I'm speaking about is not an easy process, but it is a part of yogic self-development, and we have to do it individually.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I also think that, you're talking about you have to look within, and you said something about inside out and not outside in. And most people, it's really difficult, right? When you look inside, you see how much work there needs to be done. So it's almost easier to look outside and just adapt the external things, because it numbs or it distracts you. And unpacking those layers is challenging. So I want to be mindful of the time, because I know it's getting really late for you. But can I ask you, what is authentic yoga? Because I see it being, brought up often. So according to you, just what is authentic yoga?
See, for me, authentic yoga is yoga that follows the fundamental tenets and ethos of the tradition that yoga emerges from. And that's why I'm so big on recontextualizing yoga, because it is crucial. It's like, see, if you go to a hotel and pay for a 7-course meal or 8-course meal in this sense, and they only give you salad, only give you one course. How is that fair? Mm-hmm. So when we are entering the process of yoga, we are surrounded by a variety of modalities that can suit us, that the teacher can tailor make for us. Because ultimately, how much ever group classes you do, it is an individual process. Yeah, you walk hand in hand, but you have to walk with your own feet. So it is a personal process. Yoga is a personal process. It happens in the group setup. No problem with that. But you have to move forward. It's like a competitive sport. Everybody does well. Everybody does to the best of their ability. So for me, again, I'm coming to the same point. A recontextualization of yoga is important, because once we bring the context back in yoga, we are going to open a big door and tell people that, hey, there is so many things that we can do in the yogic context and still be true to the geographical reality, the cultural reality. Because if you see the yogic tradition in the last 2000 years, there's so many options we have, right? So for me, authentic yoga is just sticking to the fundamental tenets and ethos, and as a yoga teacher, offering variety to the students, to the customers, and staying true to that. You see, that's why I nowadays this term decolonizing yoga is very popular.
Of course.
And I really feel we cannot decolonize yoga without recontextualizing yoga. Because if we say colonization of yoga has happened, that colonization has happened because of washing away the context. And if you want to really decolonize yoga, you have to bring back the context, and then things will be fine.
Even this whole decolonization movement, right? I mean, not necessarily the movement, but there's this tendency to just stick these words onto just things people are peddling. And I also think partly, and I'm adding me in this group, we as consumers and people who interact online, we tend to be lazy. I tend to be lazy, right? If someone is offering something for 2 minutes, it's easier to just be like, oh yeah, okay, that's the correct one. And that's the real one. But how often do we really do the work to verify what is being fed to us online?
Absolutely.
And I think the nature of just how we interact with the online world of yoga deeply influences who we are today as seekers.
Beautiful.
And knowing that we have to have a lot of like vigilance and discernment as to what we allow into our yoga world is important. Like on the mat, right? We're so particular. We go to a teacher and we go to that teacher for years, or we go to that studio and that's our favorite studio and no other teacher is good enough or studio is good enough. I think even online, we have to put those blinders on.
Exactly.
Because we are creating a demand for it, right? By just somehow interacting with things that are not yoga. So I just think people forget that while we have a yoga mat and it's very tangible, there is this online space that we also need to protect and see who we let in and influence us. And I think part of the confusion will end once we remove all of these distractions. That's how I see it.
Absolutely. I mean, you have put it so beautifully. And I 100% agree with that. And that's why I feel it is a moral responsibility of every yoga teacher to educate themselves about the history, the tradition, the culture of yoga, and teach in context. You may not agree with every ideology of yoga. You don't have to agree, but at least teach in context. Just because there are so many gods and goddesses, you don't have to comply with that or whatever. You can, but you have to say that it is like this. You see?
Yes.
And that's why I really feel that, we as yoga teachers need to be a little more responsible. Because we are holding on our shoulders, we are holding an ancient tradition. And we should not forget that. The reason why we are practicing yoga is because our teacher, their teacher passed that wisdom from their teacher responsibly and carefully.
Yes.
That's
absolutely.
why the term that they use in tradition is called Guhya Jnana or Gudha Vidya, means secret knowledge. If you read the scriptures, many scriptures call it secret knowledge. Why? Because it has to be handled carefully. And as far as the ecosystem is concerned, I look at traditional yoga as a cultural ecosystem, just like a forest ecosystem. And it is an ecosystem, just like a forest is not made of only one species of tree. Yoga too is like an entire ecosystem. And it is our moral responsibility as a yoga teacher to conserve this ecosystem, just
Absolutely.
like we yoga teachers are very, very sensitive about deforestation, and conserving forest ecosystem or ocean ecosystem. So we have to start looking at yoga as a cultural, traditional ecosystem. When this is communicated to the, 200-hour teachers or even to people who are not interested in teachers, then even people who come in for a drop-in class, they will do the asanas or pranayams with a sense of responsibility. And this is what we need to communicate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So true and so well said. It's like you put it in front of the seeker and let them decide. You don't decide for them like, hey, it's almost like we share such a small part of it that we have pre-decided what they need to learn and how they'll be in our echo chamber for life.
Absolutely.
And that freedom to offer it the way it needs to be offered is, I think, comes to you only when your inner yoga is strong.
Correct. Absolutely.
And I think that clarity that comes with that is precious. So as always, Prasad, this has been wonderful. As we wrap up, is there anything else you think we have missed, or do you think we've covered it all? Not all, you know what I mean.
Look, to be honest, I can go on and on for another 6 hours, because I know you are also passionate about this topic. I'm also passionate. So, but I guess we have to end here. Not really. I just want to reiterate that point that I made, that, we cannot really decolonize yoga unless we recontextualize it. And secondly, the point that it's our moral responsibility as yoga teachers to conserve the yogic ecosystem, just like the forest ecosystem or ocean ecosystem, So I'm sure we are all doing great work as yoga teachers, but our role as yoga teacher, yoga educator entails a little more integrity, a little more self-responsibility, a little more moral responsibility. And I'm sure there are lots of yoga teachers who are listeners of your podcast. They can reflect on this, because ultimately, as we spoke, it's a personal path. You have to reflect, you have to find your clarity. And as you said, Arundhati, a teacher can only indicate, we just show. A teacher shows and the student walks. And every yoga teacher is also a student. So
yes,
what we have done through this podcast, thanks to you for spreading the word, that we have just indicated, we have just presented things as they are, yes, with our own viewpoints, but we've just laid the table. Now the listeners have to listen, reflect, and if needed, do the course correction.
Yes. Beautifully summarized. Thank you, Prasad. I know this is not the last time you will be on the show.
Not at all. If you don't invite me, I'll invite myself. I will knock on your door.
You should start a podcast of your own. I will leave that thought there with you. Thank you so much. I will make sure I will link to everything, especially your YouTube channel, which has amazing videos, your Instagram. Every day, I'm not joking when I say this. I wake up, I open my Instagram and I see what post you've like put up. And it's like my little daily dose of, I don't know what to call it, inspiration, motivation, clarity, grounding. But yeah, I will make sure to link to all of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Arundhati.
And thank you for listening all the way to the very end. I hope you got a lot from that conversation with Prasad. I know I always learn so much from any interaction with him. For those of you who are interested in the Mindful Yoga Teachers Club, it's my online monthly mentorship community for yoga teachers. It's a place where you can come and ask questions. You can request for help about something that you're struggling with in yoga, or if you just need inspiration and you want to be in a group of like-minded people, then you want to consider the Mindful Yoga Teachers Club. It happens once a month. It's online and you can find all the details at mindfulyogateachers.com. Okay. And I will link to all of this in the show notes. And if you have any questions about the Mindful Yoga Teachers Club, just go online, look in the show notes, or find me on Instagram, and I'm happy to answer your questions. We meet the last Friday of every month. And if you can't make it live, these sessions are recorded and uploaded so you can watch them later, and you can even ask your questions ahead of time. So all of those notes will be available at letstalk.yoga. And I will see you next week with another guest, another episode and conversation. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.